In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, 3 brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Brian Fry, Chad Robinson, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome all you lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. Welcome to the show where we watch movies and then talk about them. I'm your host, Russell Guest, and joining me today is my other host and my good friend, right here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Chad Robinson. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well this evening.
I'm excited today, Chad. You know why that is?
Why is that, Russell?
Because first time ever, we have a doctor on the show.
Oh my goodness, we are underqualified for
But
this.
it's the second time on the show. So, returning to us, if you may have heard him on the Graduate episode, we have Mark Gardner joining us today. How are you doing, Dr. Gardner?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Glad to be back.
I'm emphasizing this a lot because you recently... How long was this effort?
It was 6 years in the making, graduated about 4 weeks ago, so I guess it is official. That's what they tell me.
And for Oscar season, which we're in, doing these award-winning movies with a lot of substance, that's why we called in the big guns. You're a professor, right?
I am, yes. I teach communication, film classes, writing classes. Whatever they pay me to do, I will teach, yes.
There you go.
I'm just now picturing you having to do the Heimlich maneuver. It's like...
Yes, that would go very, very poorly if that ever happened.
This is where you use your film knowledge and use Mrs. Doubtfire.
Oh, right.
Oh.
Not that kind of a doctor.
Or what about Bob?
There you
Even
go.
better, just you throw them on the couch and use your knee, right?
Okay, yeah, I like it.
Jump up and down on their back. That's how it works, right?
I'm more about philosophizing, so I try to analyze what was actually causing the pain and turmoil and be no help at all. So,
So let's get to know you just a little better. What's the last movie you saw?
Last movie I saw was The Irishman.
So
Martin
you had a
Scorsese.
block of time.
I did. I planned it out weeks in advance, all 4 hours, and then I watched the interview special afterwards. So it was probably about 4.5 hours in total.
How many
Wow.
bathroom breaks did you need?
I did not count. Probably more than one.
Probably. I would think.
More than
Just
one.
wait till the director's cut someday lands.
No, I feel like that was the director's cut. Netflix gave him all the rights to do whatever he wanted to do.
So what movie did you not like the first time you watched it, but then changed your mind on it, and now you like it?
So my initial reaction is probably going to go with Pulp Fiction. I hated that movie in high school. Saw it several times with friends who loved it, and they always tried to convince me that it was good. It wasn't until probably a few years ago that I watched it and actually enjoyed it. I won't say that I loved it, but I liked it more than I did.
Coming from down here, moving up here.
And I'm a huge Tarantino fan, so it was always like, why is this the one that I don't like when everyone seems to feel the opposite?
Yeah,
So
You're in good company here with that movie.
It's true. I've only seen it once, and I didn't like it. But it's funny
Wonderful.
that you say that because I actually watched The Graduate. I saw it on the AFI Top 100 Comedies list, and just like Brian did on the episode, I was like, this isn't funny. I'm upset with this.
Yeah.
I don't like this movie. And then I put it down for a long time, and I came back and did it with you, and I was like, what's my deal? This is a really good movie.
It was The Conjuring for me. You begged me to see that movie again. I was so annoyed the first time. I was just in a bad mood, I think. And the second time, I really enjoyed it. The first time, I was like, I don't get it. I don't understand.
That's why it's important to give movies a second chance sometimes. Just your mood can affect it. So you got a headache. I mean, you ate something wrong. I mean, it's cloudy outside. I don't know what it is, but it's why we watch the movies again.
Absolutely.
What was the first movie you personally started your collection with? Like, which movie did you acquire first?
Well, I've been a movie fan freak my whole life, so I was always gifted movies for Christmas. But the first one I probably bought for myself as a DVD was probably the Star Wars trilogy, episode 4, 5, and 6.
Excellent choice.
That's a
Full
great...
screen edition. It was before I got into the widescreens.
Yeah.
Was this pre-special edition?
It was definitely pre-special
Well,
edition.
those are very important to own then.
Yeah.
Hold
that's
on to
true.
those.
It's true. I do have them.
So you don't have to have the singing, dancing lady in Return of the Jedi.
That's true.
Jedi rock.
Yeah. I didn't need to see Jabba the Hutt move. Like,
I'm
just
okay with that.
keep him seated.
Stationary.
Yeah. I like the idea that they have to like push him around.
Someone's job was to move him.
You're right. It's much funnier if he's so slothly and he has to be carted around. What film location would you like to go to?
Film location. So I would say I really enjoy the locations in the movie Garden State. If you remember that one, I'm thinking of like The Void.
So is this New Jersey then?
So it is definitely New Jersey. I assume they filmed.
This seems very attainable for you.
Very random. I know.
Bold choice, New Jersey.
But I have this picture of watching the movie for the first time and being in awe of this trash void that part of the film takes place in, and it's just like this big crater of trash, and I think that would be really cool to go see.
Wow, great off-the-wall answer. Didn't see that coming.
Kevin Smith is very happy right now.
Yeah, he is.
He's an avid listener to our podcast. Calls in all the time.
All the time.
Kevin, you still can't come on. Not yet.
I'm thinking mine would be, and I'm such a Bond fan, as I've stated many times, I would want to go to the mountain resort from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I also like to ski, so I would like to ski there. But also, that's a real resort, and that just seems like a great place to go visit.
That was my favorite level in the video game. That's all my context for that.
What about you, man?
I'm going to Hobbiton. In the Shire in New Zealand. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's a whole wonderful...
You're much better answers than mine.
Yeah.
Going to New Jersey.
Here's the good news. I'm very unlikely to make it to the Alps, whereas you're very, very possible. You're at the next door neighbor state.
It's very close. That's true.
Yes. All right. So what movie is it we're doing today, Chad?
We are doing 1975's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
That's right. This movie does very well in the box office. It grosses $108.9 million, placing it at number 2 on the year, and it comes in behind Jaws, which Jaws, destroyed the box office. So, I mean, there are years where this could have been number 1, because Jaws made bank. And it comes in ahead of the movie Shampoo, which I haven't seen. Somehow, Jaws, Cuckoo's Nest, Shampoo.
Very diverse year in movies.
IMDb gives One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest an 8.7. The critics of Rotten Tomatoes love it. They give it a 94%. And the audience score, if possible, loves it even more at 96%. And this movie gets some awards and some award attention. It's nominated for Best Supporting Actor, Brad Dourif, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, and Best Original Score. And it came away with some wins as well. It got Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Actress for Louise Fletcher, Best Actor for Jack Nicholson, Best Director Milos Forman, and Best Picture. So that's cleaning up the big ones.
Actually, I'll say that this is one of 3 movies that have won those 5 awards, and those have been the main 5 awards that they win. It happened one night. It was a film noir in the 30s that won all 5 of those same awards, and then Silence of the Lambs. So it's the next one. Those are the only 3 movies that have won all 5 of those.
I love Silence of the Lambs. I didn't have any idea that it was able to come away with that much hardware.
It did. Picture, director, actor, actress, and screenplay.
Huh. And not to be outdone, the Golden Globes. Well, they have been outdone by the Oscars, but the Golden Globes, the other awards that we'll mention here is Best Motion Picture for a Drama, Best Director Motion Picture for Milos Forman, Best Actor in a Motion Picture Drama, Best Actress in a Motion Picture Drama, Best Screenplay, and Best New Star of the Year, which that one went to Brad Dourif. So pretty much carbon copy of all the awards that it won in the Oscars. It carried over to the Golden Globes, which never seems to happen anymore. I feel like if one zigs, the other one must zag.
Well, the Oscars pushed back a month. They used to be 3 or 4 weeks after the Globes.
Yeah.
But since they're 2 months after, so they want to distinguish themselves a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't know when I started noticing, but maybe it was La La Land when it came away with the Golden Globe, and it's just then it's just the Oscars were no, we're not doing that, and then it just was one of those things where then I started to notice. I was oh, the Golden Globes is almost like a kiss of death. If you want an Oscar, maybe you shouldn't win the Golden Globes. And then the AFI, the American Film Institute, rates this movie at number 20 in their top 100 movies in 1998. They revisited that in 2007, and they knocked it all the way down to 33, but that's still really impressive. And let's talk about it a little bit more. Mark, had you seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest before?
Yes, I've seen it many times. I probably watched it first when I was in high school. I tried to watch all the Best Picture winners from the beginning of time. I guess since the beginning of the awards show, and so that would have been during that time. I read the book in college, and I took a film adaptation course in college in which we studied the book and the film as well. So yeah, it's been a while.
So did you go book first and then movie, or did you go movie first then book?
Movie first, then book, and then movie again. And that was probably 15 years ago. So
a book sandwich.
Book sandwich, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's a good book too, which we can talk about also.
Very different.
And what's it like coming back? What were your expectations going in that time? The first time?
First time. I didn't really have any. I was literally watching the Best Pictures chronologically, so I can't remember what one before or after it, but...
Shampoo?
It wasn't Shampoo.
Okay.
But yeah, I wasn't... I wasn't expecting anything. I was just interested in the accolades and understanding more about that. So,
what about you, Chad? Had you seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest before?
No, I'd never seen it, so new adventure for me.
What was it like coming into it as a first timer?
I was nervous because it's billed as a comedy drama, and every time I see Oscar-nominated comedy drama, I think of Sideways, and I get a little bit angry.
Again, I didn't know this was labeled as a comedy. For the better that I didn't know that. I wouldn't call this a comedy.
No, I would not either.
It's a good movie.
It had some funny things happen, but it is not funny.
Yeah. This is such a repeat of some of the things that we said before in the last time with The Graduate. But
that's true.
So did you enjoy it?
I did. It really caught me off guard. I don't want to go into too much, but I had a good time.
That's great.
Good time may be a wrong phrase, but... It was impactful.
Yeah, yeah. I remember my mom makes good recommendations throughout the years, and she, I think I might have been down on Jack Nicholson saying, he doesn't really act. He just kind of shows up and is Jack Nicholson. Whether he's at the Laker game, whether he's in As Good as It Gets, even Joker, he painted his face, and he's just Jack Nicholson. And I always kind of felt like, maybe he's a little bit overrated. And my mom said, you got to see One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I was like, all right, I'll check that out. And she was right, because he was good in this, and he did impress me in this one, and as well as the movie was great. Good suggestion from my mom on that one. Mary and I watched this when we were in college, and I hadn't watched it since, but I mean, it stuck with me. I remembered a lot of stuff because there's a lot of profound moments in it, and it's deep cutting, maybe, is a good way of putting it.
Yep.
It imprinted on me.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to return to because I had time to slow down and take note of the other characters. For the first, because you watched it the first time, and I enjoyed it so much more. There's a lot of good content there, which we're about to get into.
Right. I can't say that I really picked up on any of the social commentary aspects of the film the first time or two. Yeah. So that was enjoyable this time around.
Just like every episode, we're going to spoil this movie. So from here on out, there will be spoilers that lie ahead. So if you haven't seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, do yourself a big favor, watch it, and then enjoy the rest of this episode. We'll be back after this.
Now here to present the Academy Award for Best Movie Podcast, the Academy Award winner, Jimmy Stewart. Every year, movie fans flock in abundant numbers to the wonderful movie podcasts. The Academy Award is proud to honor this important medium tonight. It blesses our ears. So, what gives with this movie podcast business? What is a podcast anyway? James, just stick to the script. Right, I don't see what's so special about them. If I want to listen to opinionated people yak about movies, I'd have a seat at my in-laws' house for dinner. Anyhow, here are the outstanding nominees for Best Movie Podcast. Steven Spielberg Explains Movies. James Lipton's favorite curse word. Siskel and Ebert's 2 thumbs up, 1 middle finger. Hi, that's not nice. Retro Movie Roundtable. Great films of Judge Reinhold. There's an entire podcast dedicated to the works of Judge Reinhold? I mean, he's a swell guy and all, but golly, I don't even have my own podcast here. Judge Reinhold is one of his own. James, just give the award now. Get off. Well, all right. The Oscar for Best Movie Podcast goes to the Retro Movie Roundtable. How about that, everybody? Give it up for the Retro Movie Roundtable. Wow. Oh my gosh. John, Brian, and I want to thank the millions of listeners, all of the high-stakes investors who made this effort possible. Thanks to all the presidential supporters we have to help promote the show and the big-name actors who have helped
get our name out there. We mostly want to thank all the fans who go to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and any other fine podcast provider. And particularly the fans who take 20 seconds of their precious time to subscribe, rate, and review and comment on the show. Those fans who like us on Facebook and write to us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. You're the reason we make this show. Thank you. Take care of yourselves and watch more movies. And we're back. Now, there will be spoilers that lie ahead, so this is your final warning. Now, Mark, someone hasn't seen this movie since 1975. Why don't you refresh people's memory?
Absolutely. I would start off by saying One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a story that introduces us to our protagonist of Randall Patrick McMurphy, or R.P. McMurphy, a man who just transferred from a state prison where he was serving time for violence, assault, and statutory rape of a 15-year-old girl. His transfer to the mental institution, we learn, is due to his inability to follow rules in jail and his tendency to create chaos for the people around him. The prison ultimately gave up dealing with him and just sent him to the mental health professionals and hoped that he would learn how he should behave. The nursing staff of the ward, led by the cold-hearted nurse Ratchet, also, any of the staff are not fazed by his presence and try their best to create a normal routine for him to fall into. It becomes very clear that every minute on the ward is kind of a highly controlled environment and supervised by the staff, and the patients have very little outlet to express themselves individually. So as McMurphy becomes acclimated to his new surroundings, we're introduced to the patients of the ward who would inevitably turn into his friends. Majority of these patients, we learn, are there voluntarily, and while some show distinct signs of mental and behavioral issues, as we get to know them more and more, we begin to question whether any of these men are actually crazy, and that would be in air quotes, crazy. McMurphy's presence in the ward begins a series of events to shake things up to make life on the ward more exciting. He tries to unsuccessfully get nurses to change the schedule from listening to music to be able to watch the Game 1 of the World Series. He plays a regular game of poker where he's clearly the best player and ultimately stealing money and cigarettes from his friends. On the day of a planned field trip, McMurphy, who was not allowed to attend, breaks out of the ward, steals the school bus full of patients, and drives them to the docks, where he finds a boat and takes everyone on a fishing trip. But each of these outbursts have kind of severe punishments as consequences, and as the events get more and more serious, so do his punishments, as the staff begins electroshock therapy on him to see if this helps to normalize his behavior. The climax of the film sees McMurphy sneak girls and alcohol into the ward one night, and he and the patients have an all-night party in which the patients begin to resemble normal behaviors for the first time. Billy, the youngest patient and verbal stutterer, spends his night having intercourse with one of the women at the request of McMurphy. The next morning, the staff comes to find everyone passed out and the ward a complete mess. Billy is found with the woman, and Nurse Ratchet jumps on this opportunity to publicly shame him for what he did. Billy soon thereafter commits suicide based on the guilt he feels, and McMurphy is held ultimately responsible. McMurphy goes through an extreme amount of shock therapy as his punishment, and when he comes back to the ward, shows no signs of the same person that he once was. In fact, he would be considered more of a vegetable than a person at this point. A fellow patient named Chief sympathizes with his state and smothers him with a pillow to put him out of his misery right before breaking out of the ward himself through an homage to McMurphy's original plan to escape. The story asks the audience to examine how we define what it means to be crazy and how institutions and systems get their power over us by telling us how to behave. It's a story of friendship, of sanity, and unraveling the consequences that happen when people step out of line.
Well done. Yeah, that was awesome. Now, Chad, are you a fan of the story here?
To the extent I can be, of government control, keeping you in line and refusing to let you out, which is played out in real life situations too. People have intentionally, I think it was a reporter, intentionally had themselves committed, and then they were normal and tried to get out and couldn't and struggled with it. So it's heartbreaking in that you know it happened in their time and it still happens today.
Absolutely. Now, Mark, you had read the book. Let's talk about book versus movie just a little bit. I mean, because the author, Ken Kesey, was pretty bitter about it. He had some pretty savage words.
To say the least.
Yeah, I haven't seen this since maybe The Shining, actually. King didn't like that either, so this is another Jack Nicholson movie.
E.B. White and Charlotte's Web.
Yep.
Travers with P.L. Travers with Mary Poppins.
Okay. But some pretty scathing words here from Ken Kesey. What do you feel like, having read the book, the big parting in the road is?
I mean, it's a huge, from the structure of the narrative, it's entirely different. Right. The book is told from the perspective and the voice of Chief. Mm-hmm. He tells about all of the events that are happening, and really the book is really his observation of Nurse Ratched and McMurphy's relationship. So we are getting
a third person
in theory, but somewhat of a removed narrator from that. The book goes into his backstory, Chief's backstory, more about being a war veteran and having PTSD, and that ultimately reveals why he's in the ward to begin with. And actually, he ends up being the hero of the book, whereas I think the film has McMurphy more built up as the hero by the end. Although obviously the end is what it is, where the Chief physically becomes the hero, but I guess stylistically the book is more focused on Chief as the hero. The book is much more violent as well, or McMurphy, is much more violent in the book than he is in the movie.
Interesting.
He was actually arrested for violent acts and not for statutory rape in the book, but he does boast about all of the statutory rape that he's accomplished throughout his life. Specifically, a 9-year-old girl is who he talks about seducing in the book. Again, not why he was arrested. He was arrested for assault and battery in the book, but obviously that changed a little bit for the movie. Also, I thought interesting about the book, Cheswick, the character Cheswick, commits suicide in the book. And
it's a really timid, nice guy who's
very timid, very well acted as well, I thought. That character drowns himself in a pool.
Oh, I don't like that.
And the scene kind of builds off of McMurphy's relationship to him, in that they both kind of had each other's back as these people who would speak out against the rules, and Cheswick finally kind of got on board with that. And then in that instance, McMurphy kind of took a back seat and actually sided on the side of the nurses, and Cheswick was so distraught by that he ended up killing himself in the book. So it's a lot darker of a book. The fishing trip is entirely different. The doctors, actually, that was a planned trip in the book. And the doctors accompanied him to Nurse Ratched. Her whole purpose of existence was kind of to get that trip canceled. She was kind of sabotaging the trip in the book, whereas the doctors were very much in favor of it.
This is quite a departure as you're going through it.
It's very, very different. And then the ending, of course, is much more different. The same events take place where he busts out at the end of the movie, but other scenes in the book kind of connect better to that event, so we kind of understand that event better. And ultimately, the end question you're left with in the book is Chief actually going to survive? Is he going to be able to make a home for himself outside of the ward? Is he going to be able to exist in society? And that's kind of the underlying question of the book. Whereas the movie was very much hopeful and kind of a happy-ish ending, right? You see him walking off into the sunset, freedom and all of that. So it definitely had a different undertone.
Yeah, that's a lot of change there. I also read that, McMurphy's character was supposed to be a large red-headed guy with a beard.
Irish.
Not
Irish.
Yeah, not a short. Jack Nicholson's not like an imposing figure himself.
Yeah.
Just a fireball of anger.
Another red-headed casualty of Hollywood.
It's true. Mary's redheaded, so she keeps tabs on another redheaded character. Cast it out. Yep. I don't know what you call that. Unpale washing? I don't know.
Yes.
Themes, though, in this one I thought that was interesting that I not picked up on before, but in studying it now, I didn't pick up on the order versus chaos dynamic before, between McMurphy being the chaos and, the defiant rebel, and Nurse Ratched. I did know she was a control freak. That part they hit you over the head with that one.
Right.
It's interesting to see how it's kind of in a way that reinforces that, without chaos, there's no freedom. But on the other hand, without some order, you can't function either. And this is a reminder that McMurphy can't function. So it's just kind of one of those classic moments of they're both at such polar opposites. One's an authoritarian, while the other one's not quite an anarchist, but he's going that direction. He can't function in society. That's why he's bouncing around from jail to institutions and stuff. It's just one of those interesting things. McMurphy in the book does not sound nearly as likable, though, as he is in the movie.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's because it's more of an observational take on him. So it's an outsider perspective about that character, where the chief is telling us what he's observing about. And the chief also is not a reliable narrator. He's in a mental institution. He has PTSD. So in the book, that comes into it as well. So you always have to kind of think through, who am I getting this information from? But I think you're right. It is a different portrayal.
He didn't start off very likable for me. Like, he's kissing the guards and then doing the Indian mimicry to Chief. It's like, am I supposed to like this guy?
No, not initially.
I am not a fan. He grew on me later, but his initial just trying to be outlandishly crazy.
I think that he sympathizes with the patients because they've been dictated this controlling life, and that's how he's felt his whole life, and that he saw compassion in them, and that it's his compassion through those characters and the institution that makes him more likable. The fact that he wants to take them on a fishing trip to breathe the air and to go out and have some experiences and enjoy life, as opposed to just be controlled and subdued and held from the world. And it's out of his basically hatred for the man, or in this case Nurse Ratched. He comes to bond with these who are in his mind oppressed, and they are. But unfettered freedom comes with backlashes. Everything you did, everything you mentioned, that everything he does has consequences, and it is one of those sad things of like, I find myself rooting for Jack Nicholson's character McMurphy so much in this one. It comes back to bite him.
Yeah, and I'll say this time around, I tried my best to sympathize with Nurse Ratched, even though I knew going in that what she was and who she represents. But I wanted her to have purpose, right? I wanted her to want to do well for the patients, and to do her best to help them out. And I kept looking for instances, and it didn't connect for me, even though I was trying to be very intentional about it. I couldn't make it work.
Louise said she felt Nurse Ratched was trying to do the right thing. She was just doing it poorly.
Yeah, she just believes so firmly, like, the only way to do it is my way.
Yeah, the firm hand to control.
Yeah, like, which isn't a good outlook on anything.
Well, and coming from, so I teach, as we mentioned, so thinking about how medical professionals would have been taught at that point in time. This was set, I think, in the 60s, right?
68.
68. So what that means, how health professionals would have been coached or taught to deal with patients like this. I kept thinking, okay, that's maybe where her in is, because what I know about psychology and how it kind of evolved, it wasn't really thought of as a medical profession, and so I'm sure at this point it was still very new, and people didn't really know how to really deal with characters like this, and this was kind of their way of navigating that.
I was surprised at how many people felt like the movie was disturbing just because it was dealing around the subject of the stigma of mental health, and I think that I didn't view it that way as much, but maybe that's just because of my own personal experiences and walk through life. But I found myself feeling for the patients.
Yeah.
No, for someone like me that's struggled with mental health my entire life, like, this is the nightmare. This is the place that you could wind up and try and work yourself out of, and especially their reality. I don't know the timeline, but you look at Rose Kennedy. She was lobotomized, and she was never the same, and this was around the same era. The practice was just kind of, Mark hit it, it was Wild Wild West. They didn't know what they were doing, and a lot of the things they were trying to do to help were cruel or harmful.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and that's been that way for most of history, sadly. We're only now starting to do a little better, and I think there's a long, long way to go with how to help these people.
On the little better, I think. We always have strides to make.
Yeah, and one thing that I wanted to call out was the sink. I'd never picked up on that before. Like, as McMurphy goes to try and tear the sink out, that's a symbol of him trying to overthrow the establishment in a way that his spirit is what empowers Chief to go after the sink in the end, because while McMurphy couldn't do it, it's like one of those things where you're an idea starter, and you might not be the one to do it, but your ideas carry through, and Chief was the one who had the power to make it happen. So he took the sink and crashed through that window and ran for the hills in freedom. So in a way, I didn't pick up on it before, but the sink is kind of a symbol of Nurse Ratchet's and, well, the institution. The whole thing, the whole institution's oppression.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Really well done. It's not. I can see why this movie's ranked so highly. It's maintained such great themes and stuff like that. And is it fair to say? I think based on what you've told me and what I've read, I think I like the movie better than the book. You've done both though.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I always go for the movie. There's very few books that I would say the movie isn't better. That may not be true. I may be exaggerating, but typically, yeah, movies speak more to me. So definitely in this case, that's true.
Yeah. Now, Chad, do you want to give us a rundown of the cast?
Absolutely.
It's an impressive cast.
Yeah, there's a huge cast. We have an hour and a half podcast, so I will not be doing it all. But here we go with the main actors. So Jack Nicholson, he plays Randall Patrick McMurphy, R.P. McMurphy. He's a lazy convict. He believes an asylum would be preferable to hard labor. As Russell mentioned earlier, you may recognize Jack Nicholson from watching Lakers games. There's Louise Fletcher, who plays Nurse Mildred Ratchet. She's the controlling nurse of the institution. She winds up parlaying this into a role as a doctor, so a bit of a medical upgrade in The Exorcist 2. Will Sampson, he is Chief Bromden. He's a mute, or a gigantic Indian man. He's actually native, so bonus there of casting a Native American in a Native American role. He goes on to play Crazy Horse in White Buffalo, and he's Taylor in Poltergeist 2. William Redfield, he plays Dale Harding, who is a paranoid patient. He was actually diagnosed with an illness by the doctors in this movie, so tragically he didn't appear in much else. I think it was 18 months later he would die of what he was diagnosed in. There's Brad Dourif. He is Billy Bibbit. And Billy Bibbit is a stuttering, anxious patient. Brad is a West Virginia native, so gotta mention that. And he's notably the voice of Chucky. Sidney Lassick is Charlie Cheswick, who's this childish and kind of quirky patient. He is Mr. Frum in Carrie. And I promise I'm not doing this on purpose. These are...
You're in Chad's wheelhouse now. He's the horror expert.
Yeah,
Nice.
I swear I'm not doing this on purpose. This is what you would recognize most of these people from is a horror movie. They just all went on to do it.
We'll see if you go Christopher Lloyd in a horror movie, because then I know you're onto something.
I am not. I'm going to sell our own podcast. So Christopher Lloyd plays Max Tabor. Max is an eccentric, profane patient. And if you like Christopher Lloyd's performance, check him out in Clue, one of our earlier podcasts.
Or Back to the Future, more.
We have,
Doc Brown.
We have not done that
And
yet.
you did the Page Master as well, did you not?
No.
I thought you did. My bad.
Maybe we should.
So sorry.
We need to now.
One of my favorites.
And then there's Danny DeVito, who plays Martini. And Martini is this naive, kind of simple patient. And you might recognize him as Frank Reynolds in Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Absolutely. And I want to give Vincent Chavelli just a little nod out there. He's one of the other main patients in the group there. He's the guy with the downturned eyes, like really saggy eyes, very distinctive face. He's in a number of things, but he's one of the Penguin's henchmen in Batman Returns.
Organ grinder.
Yes.
I didn't know that was his name, but I looked it up and...
I thought about mentioning Danny DeVito as the Penguin.
The Penguin.
Yeah, so there's more crossover.
Jack Nicholson was the Joker.
Oh, man.
All of these
Yes.
Batman villains in this movie.
Wow. Where was Michelle Pfeiffer to be found? Because then the Tim Burton villain trio would be complete.
She would have made a better Candy.
Yeah.
Yeah, or Rose,
Or
but more on
Rose.
that later.
Yeah.
So some other casting comments here. Director Milos Forman wanted a star in the lead role, but then to surround him with unknown actors. So despite the star-studded cast that Chad mentioned now, these guys weren't household names at the time, which is really mind-blowing. This was quite a springboard for their careers.
It was a lot of their first roles. It was Christopher Lloyd's first role.
Yeah. Mark, did you find anything interesting on the cast?
So I thought interesting that Danny DeVito originated the role in a play, the play version of this movie. That's where he was kind of discovered in that role on the stage, and then they cast him in the movie. I knew, so Louise Fletcher, she obviously won this award, didn't do a lot. She's been mostly TV most recently.
Right.
If anyone watches Shameless, on Showtime. She is the matriarch of the Gallagher family. So she plays the grandmother, as it were, Peg Gallagher in Shameless, which is where I knew her from.
I feel like The Exorcist 2 rightfully killed her career.
Maybe.
It's like, win an Oscar, don't do The Exorcist 2.
Right. Also, Brad Dourif, which I didn't know the West Virginia connection. I recognized him from Lord of the Rings, Two Towers.
Oh, he's so good.
Wormtongue. Yeah.
Grima Wormtongue.
Yep. But yeah, Nicholson, Chavelli. I don't know if I pronounced that. Vincent Chavelli, that you mentioned, Russell. I thought was interesting. He's a Nickelodeon voice actor, so all of the cartoons that I grew up watching, Our Real Monsters and Rugrats, and
Really?
Hey Arnold. He's a prominent voice in all of those. I don't know the exact characters, but
He's so physically interesting that surprised me that he's a voice actor.
He probably made most of his money voice acting, I would guess.
And Mary would be remiss if I didn't say this. He's a memorable character from the X-Files episodes, from the Fiji Mermaid episode, so which is a particularly creepy episode. So, yeah. Some other names that they considered in the main role were Marlon Brando, Gene Hackman, Steve McQueen. They were offered the role of McMurphy before Nicholson. Burt Reynolds also reportedly considered for McMurphy, and John Voight lobbied to get the role, but they said no to him. So some other heavyweights were thrown about for this one.
Absolutely. Louise Fletcher and Lily Tomlin, interesting connection here. Louise Fletcher was scheduled to play a role in Nashville that Lily Tomlin ended up playing. Lily Tomlin was originally scheduled to play Nurse Ratched.
That seems like an awful fit.
And they were filming at the same time and they switched parts.
I love Lily Tomlin. I would never want her to do this.
Nurse Ratched, I can't imagine her as Nurse Ratched. But they both were nominated for Oscars for their respective roles that same year. But they were supposed to be opposite roles in different movies.
The worst casting I saw for Nurse Ratched was Angela Lansbury was considered. It's like, no.
So sweet.
Louise Fletcher, as you mentioned, was only signed a week before the filming began, so they were really pushing it to the end on that switch. So it was another interesting one. And this was Jack Nicholson's, like, kind of his, I guess, DiCaprio moment, because he had been nominated before for Best Actor, and this was the one that got him over the hump. He had gotten nominated for Chinatown and The Last Detail. Sadly, he doesn't get one for The Shining.
No.
I'm okay with that.
He had 5 nominations in the 70s alone.
Yeah.
Pretty big.
Yeah.
Big decade for him.
Speaking of The Shining, they tried to shoehorn Shelley Duvall in. Did you see that for Candy?
Mm-hmm.
Like, please don't cast her.
Yeah, well, I mean...
I think she tried to shoehorn herself in, it sounds like.
I think so. And a lot of the extras in the hospital are actually patients, because they shot this in a real facility, which helped the actors get into the part a lot. And if that sounds mean or disturbing or ineffective, the doctors who were there said it actually was good for the patients to have people from the outside come in and interact with them, and it was good therapy. Again, bottling everybody up and hiding them from the world might not always be the best thing to do. It's just a hard thing to know what to do.
The interviews that I would read from Nicholson, really any of the cast that you mentioned, it sounds like the filming of this was a not very fun time. It sounds like it was a very horrendous experience, long and very just emotionally draining. That was kind of a common thread that I saw people talking about.
Talking about the making of this movie, this is wild. Before I quite go into the director, there's that kind of the road for how this movie got made. I guess 13-year road that this took to get made into a movie. Ken Keasley was actually part of a volunteer group of 140 students to take LSD, which under a CIA-funded program, they were trying to test out LSD to see, if they could interrogate people with it and control them with it. Obviously, that didn't work. They just stared at the wooden table like, it's moving. But he worked at a hospital, and in the night shift, he stole LSD. And so under the influence of LSD, he writes One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. From what I'm reading, it seems like the book is a lot more trippy. Mm-hmm. Like, it talks about machinery running and the walls moving and fog filling up the room. And none of these, I guess, unnatural elements are presented in the movie. Perhaps this is why Keasley got so upset. Although Forman made such a good movie, he made you look really good, so I don't know why you...
The machinery aspect is kind of tying back to the Chief narrative. It was man versus or machinery versus man, and that was kind of the end. where an earlier scene in the book, he's watching a dog sniffing out in the field from the ward, and he watches the dog freely roam, and then that kind of plants the seed that he wants to get out, and McMurphy kind of enforces that for him, and then the dog gets hit by a car. And that kind of is this sort of symbol that, okay, it's beautiful, but eventually machinery is going to win out. So I think that's all very, very relevant to the book, definitely.
And the overtaking of his people. And Kirk Douglas, the actor Kirk Douglas, was the first encountered the book in 1961, and he instantly fell in love with it. He secured the rights for the opportunity, and he planned to star in it, but the making of this movie got tied up. They made it into a play in 1963. It ran for about 83 performances, not a super long run. He planned to star in it, but it didn't work out, so he passed it down to his son, Michael Douglas. So this is where Michael Douglas's name is one of the two producers on this. Douglas then carried this through, and every major studio didn't want to touch it. Again, it's this mental health stigma that's there in the 70s. And so he had a hard time getting this made. And Milos Forman was somebody that Kurt Douglas had met in Prague. And so this was somebody that Kurt was thinking about long before, and that he met Milos during the Soviet occupation of Czechoslovakia. So he's coming from a very different perspective. Keasley is from an American perspective, and he was writing about how American society is so oppressive, and Milos related to it more from a Soviet communism. Life is so oppressive. And so it was interesting to see those two visions coming at the same story from two very different angles. So it's such an interesting road to getting made.
Yeah, the Broadway play that you mentioned, 1963, so Kirk originated the role of McMurphy on Broadway. Interestingly, Gene Wilder played Billy in that production.
Wow, that seems heavy for Gene.
Pretty crazy. And this is Michael Douglas's first credit as a producer. It's kind of his first work behind the camera, so I'm guessing they had a very paternal son-father relationship there. He would have been somewhere in his early 30s when he did that, so... and then I saw the only other producer, I'm probably going to butcher his name, but the Saul Zaentz seemed to team up with Forman on several things. He was on Amadeus when they won the Oscar for that, and Goya's Ghost they reteamed in 2000. And he actually won another Oscar for The English Patient, so he was pretty celebrated.
I always think of the Seinfeld episode when you say The English Patient.
Yeah.
Lloyd, I don't understand how you couldn't like The English Patient.
He wound up doing Hobbit and Lord of the Rings as well.
Oh, yeah.
Very cool.
Keasley wrote a screenplay for this, and perhaps this is where the bitterness comes from, because Milos is like, oh, that's nice, and then threw it out. And so he went and got Bold Goldman, and the two of them wrote the screenplay, which again is more coherent and more likable.
The Keasley screenplay had the chief as a narrator. It was still that same idea.
Do you think that could have worked in the movie format? Because you're just going to be narrating inside the head the whole time.
Right. If you have a mute character, how do you make that
have Morgan Freeman talk for them? Maybe. Yeah. P. McMurphy. Rolled into the Oregon State Mental Institution.
I mean, he was great in other prison-type films, so yes.
No, hey, I guess he was around at the time. I don't know.
Yeah, he's 70-something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think about Milos as a director, Chad?
I think he was great. I've only seen Amadeus and Hair out of all his other works, but he seems to enjoy these kind of weighty tones in his
he does.
In his movies, and he doesn't really shy away from controversy or even sadness.
No, you're right about that. Ragtime's not sad.
I have not seen that.
It has some sad moments. But
it does.
It's joyous.
Yeah. Man on the Moon, certainly heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, for a movie about Andy Kaufman, I was like, oh boy, Andy Kaufman, he's so funny. Yep. And Jim Carrey, this is going to be a riot.
It's going to be perfect.
And then I got into it, I was like, whoa, this is heavy.
Yeah, he's a very weird person.
Oh, yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. You know, I was afraid when I went into Bohemian Rhapsody, I was going to get into Man on the Moon. I went in really timid, and then, like, they handled it. I was like, man, I really wish they had handled Man on the Moon more like that. Like, that's how I wanted to feel after watching it. I wanted to appreciate the person, their art, and what they did, and not dwell on the pain and the harm.
Well, Milos wasn't about that life.
No.
He was pretty deliberate that way.
Well, I guess growing up in Soviet-controlled Czechoslovakia, you know pain.
Right.
So
interesting. You bring up Man of the Moon. It seems like, I read that Forman named his children Andy and James after Andy Kaufman and Jim Carrey.
Huh.
Wow.
Was a fan of that narrative.
Yeah, I guess so. So I just thought it was so interesting how he basically reshaped the whole movie, and that's a lot of control. And I remember kind of thinking back when we did The Shining. I know Chad doesn't like it, so but I mean,
I don't either, so it's fine.
Hey,
Speak openly.
camaraderie. Yes.
I remember what it was like to have I thought, man, I can see why the writer, just got so mad that somebody came in with their vision and threw what they did out.
Also, someone that likely wrote their story on drugs.
Probably. But in fairness,
Back to the list.
they're both just so good. It's one of those things where they've made you look really good, and I just don't understand why you come away with it as it's a different interpretation.
Right.
Doesn't this happen with every movie? I don't know. Like, one of my favorite authors is Michael Crichton, and every single book I've ever read of his has changed dramatically.
Yeah, Jurassic Park was a very different book.
Very different. Very good.
Yes.
Wow.
I wouldn't mind them remaking that someday in the future and doing it more to the story. But this isn't Jurassic Park. Do you feel like the storytelling worked well, though, from Milos's control of like presenting information and the emotional journey that he takes you on?
Yeah, I don't think he really isn't a flashy director at all. He tries for the realistic, right? He wants realism and he wants to imitate real life, and I think that's true of all of his movies. So there wasn't really anything that stood out to me as a flashy choice, even from like the camera angles. There wasn't anything that stood out. It really was just they were dropping you in this asylum and you were just there with them. And there was no even calling attention to the fact that you're watching a movie.
I had the same thought, but then I looked at the awards. It's like best cinematography.
Nominated.
Yeah, it was.
Nominated.
It was nominated.
It didn't win that one.
Yeah.
And rightfully so, because I also was sitting there going like, this movie is not shot very well, in my opinion. I mean, that's a strange thing to say to an Oscar-nominated movie, but I don't think there was... I mean, there were some moments where I thought they didn't focus on people's faces well. People were jumping out of frame. I mean, the group wasn't shot in a well where you could take everybody's reactions in at the same time. I had a lot of criticism for how some of these scenes were done. I thought it was... I wouldn't call it, like, amateur filmmaking, but I thought that, as far as the actual craft of feeling the emotions of the group and stuff like that, camera work was probably one of the more lacking parts of this movie.
There were a lot of close-up shots. I noticed that even with the groups, there was very little else in the frame. So I assume that was deliberate, but it was just a tale of the people.
Yeah, and you can get people's facial reactions, but again, if you put like somebody in the foreground, you see their face, and then somebody's a little bit out of focus in the background, you can see their face. I just thought there was a lot of more potential with the angles and whatnot, and I just didn't think that they explored.
Do you feel that way about his other movies, though?
No, I don't feel that way, because I remember again, I'm going to go back to Man on the Moon. I remember feeling the heaviness of cancer. It felt like, I was like, man, this is a battle that he's in right now, and that this is heavy, and I felt the weight of the emotions. I didn't feel that there. So maybe the cinematographer, Haxel Wexler and Bill Butler, they share a credit, but I think a little more on that is Haxel Wexler actually was fired as the cinematographer, and then he was replaced by Bill Butler. And Forman said he was terminated over artistic differences, but Wexler and Butler both received Academy Award nominations together. So, but even though Wexler said there's only about 2 minutes in the movie that he did not shoot, but of course that's him saying that. I did 98% of that. So I wonder what the creative differences would have been. Like, don't shoot it so inspired.
It's too pretty.
It's too pretty.
Stop it.
Chad, anything else on Milos?
Just that, especially with this movie, everything felt so sterile. The lighting was harsh in a lot of it. The walls were very plain. I imagine this was realistic you said it was a real mental institution, but everything was clean, everything was sterile, and everything was just tight in, and it almost gives you a feeling of claustrophobia, like you said, I want wider angle shots or better pictured faces. Just, I don't know, it was unsettling to me.
Maybe the confinement of the camera was reinforcing of what they were feeling. I hadn't considered that until now.
I like that.
Maybe my desire to have more experience was him taking away that from you. Maybe a stretch, I don't know. But, no,
I like it.
Yeah, I like that. You've made me like it more somehow, or justify it.
Okay.
So this is shot, as I mentioned, in an Oregon State Hospital, and Superintendent Dr. Dean Brooks was the one who agreed to give the filmmakers unlimited access there, which is pretty bold move, and that's why they shot it there. Even though the whole time I was watching, I was like, is this New England? And then at the end, I was like seeing the mountains. I was like, of course it's not New England.
Right.
But that bay, like when they got on the boat and stuff like that, I got this real New England vibe off of things. So the fishing boat and whatnot. So wrong ocean.
They look the same.
Yeah, obviously shooting it on location was brilliant. I don't think that they could have reduplicated that atmosphere that you're talking about, Chad, that sterility and stuff had they built a set. I mean, they put you in there, and actually, like I said, some of the extras in the background are real patients.
Yeah.
Yeah, the hospital was, I think that was probably the smartest choice they made in making the film, was to do it on location like that. So it's perfect.
I thought one thing that they did do well was in the wardrobe. I mean, Nurse Ratched was like super primped, and like the hat had to be like such a way. Her hair was done in such a way, like kind of looks like devil horns almost, like the way her hair is like done up like in this way that it doesn't move, and her face never moves. So she's in a whiter color of white than the patients. Like if you look at the patients' garbs, like they're like not all the way beige, but it's like maybe a dingier white. Yeah, and so that kind of shows like I'm in control, and like it's very much reinforcing through the wardrobe. And similarly, McMurphy wears dark colors, so like he's that rebel. Like he wears that dark cap. He's got the black leather jacket and stuff like that. So, just another one of those ways that the visuals were reinforced. Again, feeling very much like you're in there with them.
Definitely.
Yeah, I wrote the same thing, that the patients kind of had drab colors. No one really had anything bright, and the staff, down to the orderlies, they all had these pristine, clean uniforms.
They let one guy have a robe, which was odd, I thought, like a blue bathrobe that had like a mustache, and like the guy who was like trying to explain like he was suspicious of his wife sleeping around on him.
Yeah.
I forget that character's name now, but
the guy who died shortly thereafter.
Yeah, it was Dale Harding.
Dale Harding's character, yeah. It was a strange move that he was kind of a non-conforming piece as well.
Yeah.
I wonder I do wonder why that was. It makes sense that McMurphy was different, but why him? Maybe just...
And I always wonder, and maybe we'll talk about this soon, but the idea of being there voluntarily versus being forced there. Most of the people that we meet are voluntary. And so because they're voluntary, maybe they're able to wear whatever they want to wear, whereas other people are more. This is me interjecting. I have no idea.
That was an interesting point. I remember that was a scene I had somehow forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when he looks around at everybody and says, you know, wait, you guys can just leave anytime you want to?
Mm-hmm.
You choose this for yourself?
Right.
Yeah, that was odd, because it seemed like most of the patients were worse off than McMurphy. Like, they probably should have been institutionalized to some extent.
Well, we know one guy couldn't be there because he like was so like he thought like he suspected his wife irrationally so, and then we also know that Billy, I think, was abused by his mother, like physically abused, because he had this very fearful moment of letting his mother into any part of his life.
Yep.
If nothing else, it's paranoia. So we don't know as much about the other characters and their backstories, but there's signs of this might actually be an improvement.
Yeah.
As hard as it is to believe for some.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why they're choosing to be there. Well, against, you know, McMurphy's like, you guys doing this on purpose?
Right.
Did you think there was any significance to voluntary versus involuntary in that scene? Because the governmental thing, that illusion didn't. You don't get to choose your government.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, that was actually probably my favorite scene, was when he had that realization, or he was told that people were there voluntarily, and when he's realizing that he is one of the minority in that sense, where he probably feels like a majority when he's in, as in he's very normal, but then he feels very minority-like. So that was probably one of my favorite scenes. But I think maybe the symbolism of that is we just kind of, if you kind of put yourself in the place of someone who is seeking mental help or mental health professional, we want to believe that they're going to want to help us, right? So people who go there are looking for that help. as opposed to McMurphy, who obviously didn't choose to go to jail, didn't choose to come to the asylum. It was all against his will, and so he doesn't have that mindset or doesn't have that appreciation for the mental health profession, even though what we were witnessing was a very poor interpretation of that profession. For the patients, they may have seen it as normal, and that's kind of that's something that they chose for themselves because it was the quality of life that they wanted.
I get the impression that he parlayed this into getting himself committed, not that he was necessarily transferred, like he was actively trying to stay there.
Yeah.
I think that he thought it would be easier than doing time in jail, like, because they even said, like, we think you're just trying to get out of work, your work duty through jail. And I think he looked surprised when the the guy guarding the pool, the Washington, I think was his name. Yeah, when Washington tells him, he's like, I got 68 days left. He goes, not in here, you don't. Yeah. You've transferred into whenever we say you can go, which might be never. And he looked surprised. So that was another one of those moments too that, like Chad said, I think that there's a distinct moment of, I got here looking for an easier ride than prison, and he found himself in a much worse situation in many ways.
Definitely.
Probably. The soundtrack to this movie. Chad, did you have any thoughts on that one?
Well, it clearly was appreciated by the Academy. It won Best Original Scores, and to me, I just wrote one word, and it was emotional. It guides you through the scenes and sets the tone for you of, hey, there's tribalness at some points. There are Indian drums, or they're just these morose violin and cello background music, and it's just makes you very sad when you're supposed to be, or energizes you when you're supposed to be.
Mark, what do you think about the opening and closing theme?
I'm pretty usually attentive to music in movies. I can't say that this really stood out to me that much. I felt like the setting itself captured more of the feeling, more so in many ways. I would expect the music to do that in movies, but for this one, I don't really remember the music that much. And I think that may have been intentional. It was kind of a more simplistic score. There's not a lot of it.
No, you're right about that.
So, nothing really stood out to me about it. But that may be a good thing. Maybe it kind of just faded into the background. And I like your description, Chad. It kind of sets up your emotions. Maybe even for me, it was clearly without even realizing that it was doing that. But I think that's true.
The first scene and the last scene, which are the same song, which is emblematic because the scenes, you're driving from nature, like bringing McMurphy, and he's like this man from the wild, and they're bringing him into the institution, and in the inverse of that, Chief's running away from the institution out into nature being freedom, the construct being the establishment, the system. The music starts with these tribal drums, and it's it's got these high-pitched twirly sounds that are like you said, a little bit chaotic, a little off-put, maybe crazy, maybe wild. And the warm brass comes in and overtakes it, which I kind of take that to be like the establishment. That's as he's like walking into the facility. It syncs up with that. And but in the end, it ends in a dark note, kind of like what you were talking about, Chad. So the only other moment that I really noticed the score was the fishing trip. There was the joy of the fishing trip for the patients there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're hitting on it. The music, when you're in the facility, they don't really want you to have a context for music. Really, I mean, I remember there are some scenes where the radio is playing in the background, or they're playing the classical music.
Oppressively loud.
Yeah. Not the World Series, the music instead. But yeah, when you're in the institution, maybe that was a conscious decision to not have music or a score playing very much. And then when you're outside of it, fishing trip or before and after, yeah, I think that's an interesting realization. I hadn't thought of it.
There is a lot of quiet though, and you're right. I think had this movie been made today, they would have gone for like, hey, drive home the point that Billy's afraid right now, or drive home the point that. Like make Nurse Ratched seem angrier with score, and they didn't go any in that direction. Yeah. So look for this, Mark. Do you have any look for this moments?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned that I'm an Oscar nerd. So I mentioned already that this is one of the top 5, or one of the 3 movies that have won the top 5 Oscars. Jack Nicholson. I mentioned his. He actually beat out Al Pacino that year for Best Actor in Dog Day Afternoon, which I thought was another good movie and another good performance.
Did they get it right?
I think they got it right.
Okay.
Nicholson obviously won 2 other times after that, but in different decades. I thought that the Jaws connection was interesting because what I know about that period in time, Jaws is kind of the first blockbuster film that we recognize as the term blockbuster. Kind of where blockbuster was coined was through
especially summer blockbuster.
Exactly.
That used to be like a dead time of the year, and then Jaws came out.
Through Jaws, and I think when the movie came out, Cuckoo's Nest came out, it grossed at that time. It was the 7th highest grossing film of all time, which I think speaks to the Jaws blockbuster spillover a little bit, where people were kind of getting used to going to the movie, and I'm wondering if there's a correlation to that, where we have this very studio-centric movie like Jaws that draws people in by the droves, and then kind of spilling over into Cuckoo's Nest, which is very different of a movie, obviously.
Very different, and it comes out in November.
Mm-hmm.
So like Jaws is a summer movie.
Summer, yeah. I thought that the directors that were nominated that year, outside of Forman, are all amazing directors. Federico Fellini, who's probably one of the most celebrated directors of all time, nominated for 12 Oscars, never won any because all of his movies were in Italian.
He's the Buffalo Bills of directors.
Exactly. Robert Altman was nominated for Nashville that year. Sidney Lumet was nominated, and Stanley Kubrick was nominated. So it was a powerhouse of 5 directors.
I'm sorry, year. Chad Kubrick didn't get it.
I'm fine.
And I had never. Barry Lyndon is his movie. I've never heard of this Kubrick movie, so I'm very eager
I've heard
to
of it,
look
but
into
I've not done it.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, my last piece of information is for current times. So there is a series being filmed right now, actually, for Nurse Ratched. She has a series coming out, and Michael Douglas is producing the series. Nurse Ratched is going to be played. A younger version of Nurse Ratched is played by Sarah Paulson, and it's produced. Ryan Murphy is the showrunner, so I'm assuming it's going to be on FX or one of those networks. Sarah Paulson, Cynthia Nixon, Judy Davis, Sharon Stone, Don Cheadle, Corey Stoll are all characters in this show. So it's supposed to come out this year, so look for that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know that I want more Nurse Ratched. She's
they're trying to humanize her. They want to tell her backstory.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I mean she was associated with being so uptight that they said, like, as you mentioned, that the cast had a hard time making this movie. It was a lot of, and when they kind of got to the end of it, like they had this big party, and that she came in wearing nothing but her panties, and which to show people that she was loose and and fun, and I'm not this Nurse Ratched person. To which I would have said, put your clothes back on.
Right.
Yeah, she said she wasn't allowed to smile or laugh, so that's why she did that at the end.
Yeah.
Can't you just imagine that deadpan, like Louise Fletcher in only her underwear, not smiling or laughing, but just standing there?
I don't want to picture this. I might just be like, I appreciate your sentiment, but on second thought, well, maybe not do that. could you not? Chad, do you have any look for this moments?
Yeah, towards the very beginning, you can see that Jack Nicholson jumps on a guard, and he kisses him. And the guard's reaction was genuine, because it was set up to be the other guy, the other orderly. And Milos wasn't getting a good reaction from him. He kept trying to redo it, and so he told Jack Nicholson in private, hey, kiss the other guy. And the other guy was very surprised. He actually kind of takes a swing at him. And so that I'm sure that was fun for everyone.
Huh. I've got one here that's former President Barack Obama says this is his favorite movie of all time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool.
As well as director Ron Howard said that as well. So, Opie and the president.
Good company.
Yeah. And another fun look for this moment is Angelica Houston, who we did not mention, is Jack Nicholson's one-time girlfriend at this point, and she appears in the crowd on the pier as the fishing boat comes back. So there's another big-name actor in this movie that we somehow evaded us in the beginning.
In the background.
It's my favorite time in the movie. Sorry. It's my favorite time in the podcast. Movie superlatives. Mark, do you want to start us off with your MVP?
Yeah, I can't say mine are going to be that exciting. MVP, it has to be Nicholson. I mean, I've liked him in most what he's done, but this was definitely my favorite that he's ever done. So he's easily my MVP. I love the inmates. I love their camaraderie. I love the relationship that they all had, and I thought they all did really well. But Nicholson definitely is mine.
Okay, and Chad.
Yep, Jack Nicholson. He's magnificent, and he's the engine that makes this go.
I momentarily considered Milos Forman because of how transformative he was with the script. I think I wouldn't have enjoyed this movie near as much if Chief been telling the story, and I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much had McMurphy been more unlikable. So it is tempting to go with him because this is a very different vision than the one Ken Kesey had. However, Jack Nicholson, this is the best that he's done, and I love '89 Batman. By the way, that's really high up there for me. And but this is Jack Nicholson's best acting performance to my knowledge. So this is up there for him. And so there's a right answer here, and Jack Nicholson is it. So best supporting actor, Mark. This is a tougher one. There's so many good ones.
I mean, there really are, but I guess I went with Louise Fletcher. I went with Ratchet, and the reason I did that. And I should emphasize this, she won Best Actress, and I remember when I first watched the movie, being the Oscar nut that I was, I never understood why she was a lead actress in this movie. She didn't really stand out to me the first few times, but then watching this time, I could see where she was all over the place.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I missed that the first few times, but as a supporting role, I think she should have been more supporting, probably a supporting actress. I'm not sure, lead actress.
Okay.
It's probably a strong word for that, but the Oscars get that wrong all the time, so I chose Louise Fletcher.
Okay, and Chad.
Yep, 2 for 2 so far. She does a great job at making you hate her, but the entire time I was sitting there appreciating her performance. So.
Oh, she's great at being dislikable in the same way that Margaret Hamilton was like so good at being evil, which is so funny because they're acting because they're not these people. So it's one of those things where I have to admit, if I did meet Louise Fletcher, I would have to scowl at her and be like, "Argh."
That's Jack Gleason for me, Game of Thrones. He plays Joffrey, and he just has such a punchable face, and he's just this cruel little kid. But
you know, he's an actor.
Yeah, he's apparently he's the little tiny kid that Batman and Batman Begins gives the radio to.
Oh, fun!
Very cool.
Fun facts there.
Didn't know that.
I also went with Louise Fletcher, but for diversity's sake, I'm going to say Brad Dourif.
Okay.
Because maybe a little bit of home cooking here, but I'm gonna pick Chucky on this one because he is poignant in his scenes and the intensity that he has on his face, and the stuttering seemed genuine. It didn't seem false or forced, and again the concern that was on his face that he expressed, as well as the happy moments as well too. And he exhibited the greatest range of anybody, because Nurse Ratched, she's the same the whole way throughout the movie. That's her character. She's controlled in her emotions even. But Jack Nicholson's always, he's a wild card. But Brad Dourif is the one who exhibited, I would say, the most difficult range of acting. So I'm going to go ahead and, just for diversity's sake, hand it to Brad.
Okay.
Hidden gem, Mark.
So I went with Brad Dourif as my hidden gem. And I also put Christopher Lloyd.
Yeah.
I thought. So just what you said about Billy is spot on. So for Christopher Lloyd, I thought that his character, and I think his name was Tabor or Tabor, I'm not sure. He always had this kind of smirk on his face that I think kind of let us get to know him, even though we never found much out about him at all.
He's an instigator.
He's an instigator. He has this twinkle in his eye, and I think that every time he had some sort of plot forming in his head, you could see that on the screen in the few times that he is on the screen. So
that's the most aggressive I've seen Christopher Lloyd. It was a lot of fun.
Buckaroo Banzai? Across the 8th dimension?
I mean, he had an alien mask on.
Darn you, John Morphin! And the high horse you rode in on!
No, that was Doc Brown in an alien mask.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, I don't know. When I watched his performance here, I felt very compelled to cast him as a likable but eccentric scientist who invents a time machine and befriends a high school boy and sends him back into time unknowingly. I just got that. I don't know why. It's very specific. It just came to me.
Right.
I watched this and I
should
said,
probably patent that or something.
I don't
Trademark that.
And I think his agent should have worked on that.
Right.
So, Chad, who's your hidden gem?
I'm going to go with deep cut. Peter Brocco. He played the general. And he's the guy in the wheelchair that is... he starts mumbling the Star-Spangled Banner. And he acts like this old-age hero that we get a lot of the stereotypes of. But he actually made the early scenes seem real to me because everyone knows or knows of that just aging military vet. And he did a great job with it.
I thought you have to call it when he goes up to the punching bag. That's like the punching bag. And he takes his cane because he's in a wheelchair, well below it, and he takes his cane up like almost like it's a pinata and he goes.
Yes.
Okay, I don't think this is a comedy, but that little thing made me laugh.
It sounds funny to me. I don't know. Comedy roots.
My hidden gem's gonna go to Danny DeVito. I got well into this movie before I realized that was Danny DeVito.
It did not look like it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so young and not quite as round and ball-like as he would later be. He is so... he changes his facial expressions, and he really... he transformed himself to me to the point where I got well into this movie. And before I realized, oh, that's DeVito? This wasn't my first time watching the movie either, so that really hit me. So I'm gonna go with DeVito. I'm a big fan of his in general. So
definitely.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. The best actor for the small size.
Ouch. That's a big statement there.
Because he's a very small man.
Okay, wow.
Peter Dinklage.
I love Peter Dinklage.
I mean, that's hard to beat.
Yeah.
Drew Barrymore as a child.
Yes.
Well, if we open it up to children, then I don't know.
Okay, so if you had to recast somebody, Mark, who would it be? Who would you put in their place?
Well, I kind of complicated this one because I would like to see this movie redone today.
Whoa!
But I would like them to change the story around a little bit. Obviously, shock therapy wouldn't be as done, I guess, today. Obviously, hopefully not. So I could see this story easily being redone with antidepressants or like Adderall, Ritalin type of things. So I was recasting it for that story in my mind. And I had just got done seeing The Lighthouse, which is a film this year. So I put Robert Pattinson down, which I fully am aware that sounds ridiculous because before I saw The Lighthouse, I didn't ever think of him as a good actor, but he blew my mind away in that movie, and I could see him easily taking on a role like R.P. McMurphy.
Oh, he's great. Mm-hmm. Twilight was his make a ton of money and never do those types of movies again.
Good for him. I'm glad he made all that money.
I think he's about to make some money again as Batman.
Yeah.
Is he? I hadn't heard that. So
yeah, he's your new Batman.
I'm not sure how I feel about that, but okay, we'll go with it.
I'm on board for this.
I went around saying Affleck was going to be terrible.
I mean, I'll take it. Anybody above
he
Affleck.
He didn't get very good movies, but Affleck wasn't terrible. It wasn't his fault.
I didn't even see it. So.
Oh, well then.
And then I said Angelina Jolie as Nurse Ratched.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah, interesting. She's a lot tougher of a Nurse Ratched than that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I would more not want to cross her.
She's got, was it Girl Interrupted?
Girl Interrupted, yeah.
No, that's so appropriate.
Some experience.
Yeah, mental health.
Chad, if you had to recast somebody, who would it be and who would you put in their place?
Going small here. Wow, that was a pun and I didn't mean to. Moria Small, who played Candy, I'm recasting her with Kirstie Alley. I feel like Kirstie Alley would bring a little more personality and almost like bimbo-like qualities to the role. I didn't feel like Candy, the character just didn't work for me.
Close. I'm going to go with Rose, her friend, who I felt like I didn't get this party girl vibe off. I felt kind of sad for her.
Yeah.
For one, she's a little bit on the old side to be coming in and doing what she's doing. I was like, this isn't good for this. And so I thought to myself, PJ Souls, and this is just before Carrie and Halloween and Rock and Roll High School and her running through the 70s. So you'd be getting her just a little bit before that. But she was born in 1950. She would have been about 25. I'm thinking a more rebellious type of girl coming in here would be more believable and more fun. So I think PJ Souls is gonna party with the crazies.
Like that.
So best shot, Mark.
So I chose when he's entering the facility for the first time. We mentioned the kissing of the guard as part of that scene. I loved the. I guess these are more acting choices than they are cinematography choices. But as he's dancing, he's coming in, he's kissing, he's very lighthearted. He's overly trying to pretend to be crazy at that point, just to drive home the fact that he wanted to be there. And then once he crosses that threshold of the door, almost the lighting changes, his face changes, everything changes.
The mood does change.
Where he just has a sudden realization that, oh, this is actually where I am. This is what my life is going to be. And I thought that was really brilliantly done. Really brilliantly acted, for sure, but I think in general...
That higher perspective looking through the gate as well. You're on the inside, shooting to the outside.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good choice.
Yeah, walking right at you.
Yeah, great choice.
Now, Chad, what's your best shot of the movie?
For me, it's Chief walking off into the night with the dark tree line and dark skies overhead at the very end. There was a cloud over what he had just done. I mean, he was helping his friend who'd been lobotomized, but, he killed him. And I really appreciate the fact that as pointiness is seen as it was, the director resisted the urge to make it this bright horizon that he was walking into. He was walking into the unknown, and so it was dimly lit, and don't know if Chief makes it or not.
That's the right answer. I'm picking that one as well. But just for diversity's sake, I'll call out one other moment. When Nurse Ratched is first introduced, she's coming from behind a gate, which is very prison-like. There's a red light over her head. There's a clock ticking in the background. Again, not a lot of music here. And the sound effect of this, like, tick, 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 as she's coming in, very proper, all in the white and stuff like that. Right away, she means business, and she's no fun at all. So that's why I said I'm not sure I want a show of Nurse Ratched. She seems like the ultimate killjoy. Right. So
she's every teacher you hated in high school.
That's a great comparison.
Yeah,
I had a history teacher named Mrs. Hannah, and this reminds me so much of Mrs. Hannah.
I'm sure she's listening right now and very proud.
I hope so. I hope so. You're Nurse Ratched, Mrs. Hannah.
Oh man. You are the opposite of Batman.
So, best scene, Mark?
I have so many. So, okay. I mentioned already how much I liked when he found out that everyone was there voluntarily. I guess I also thought the best scene was, again, when he was introduced to everyone. They're around the table playing cards, and he immediately disrupts their game, and I feel like that's very symbolic of the whole movie, where he comes in and just shakes things up and changes everything. So I think that initial scene where everyone's playing cards and he's kind of meeting and greeting, and I thought that was really, really cool.
Oh yeah,
really
it's like
done.
Coming and throwing like an Asian carp into the river.
Right.
Next thing you know, it's chaos.
Yeah.
Chad, what is your best scene?
Mark touched on this earlier, but the pool scene where McMurphy is telling the orderly that he only has 68 days left, and the orderly says, "You still don't know where you are. You don't leave until we say you can leave." And you see the color kind of drain out of McMurphy's face, and it becomes a horror movie at that point of, oh, I've been messing with Nurse Ratched, and I probably
should not have done that.
Yeah, I should not have done that. And all of his errors are setting in on him and what he signed himself up for.
I didn't like Washington's character, again, talking about how the treatment of mental patients and with these needs and stuff like that, he's very angry, quick to be physical, not compassionate, not caring at all. He's a guard, like a prison guard. And unfortunately, sadly, that's how it was back then. Yeah. So I know from multiple accounts and family experiences on that. So it's that's a sad character for me. It shows you the opposite of what people like that need. So you're right. That a lot of reality does sink in at that part of the movie. My best scene is actually a happy moment where she says you can't watch the World Series on night 2 even after he gets the 10th vote. And he goes over to the blank TV screen and he talks about Koufax takes the pitch, and he moves around and like he's narrating a fictional game in his head, and the other patients just see how happy he is and how much energy he has, and they're drawn to it, and they just want to participate in the joy of it. Even though the game's not on, they wanted to watch the game, and in a way he's determined to bring this game to them in the same way that he brought the fishing trip to them. So he brought this little slice of happiness to them, and it's that happiness that I want to see these characters have. And so there's a rebellious streak in me, as Chad will say as well. I've gotten in trouble opening my mouth and doing things that I shouldn't have done many times. So I related so much to McMurphy in that scene because it seems like something like I would have wanted to do, and it made everybody happy while raising a little bit of hell.
That was a great scene.
Yeah, it was a really good scene.
Change one thing, Mark.
I'm not a fan of the fishing trip. It just is too outlandish to me that he got the bus, he drove the bus, and got to the boat, no one died. I feel like so many bad things could have happened, and it just wasn't that believable. Counterpoint to that, I think the book handled that scene much better. In that sense, I think maybe that's the one part of the book that I thought was much better done. But the fishing trip just seemed too outlandish to really enjoy too much of. So
no, it's okay. He told me
that was my change.
I checked the docs already. It's okay. We got this.
Right.
The cast all got seasick.
Yeah, I heard that.
Well, they're driving in circles.
Right.
Yeah, Danny DeVito still says it makes him queasy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Chad, change one thing.
I would have excluded the medication line scene for McMurphy. I don't know exactly what they were medicating him for. The in-house doctors kept saying that they believed he was faking it, so what the heck are you giving him?
I think they're just giving him drugs to sedate him to see how he responds.
Maybe, but it just seems weird because the doctors are saying, we don't believe he belongs here. So what are you giving him other than maybe sugar? And they should have explained that, sugar pills. I don't know.
That's what I was thinking. Something just to like normalize the procedures that when he does end up taking something, he would be used to taking something. But
actually, when they're debating the second time whether he should go back to jail or not, and Nurse Ratched is the only one who keeps him there, that's when I know she's evil. Mm-hmm. And you definitely know later when she basically rubs Billy's nose in it and she pushes his buttons and pushes him over the edge. But because I don't think she does care about these patients. She's all about the control. Mm-hmm. And but that when she says like I think I can still work with him, like that's when I knew she was evil. So that just reminds me of that. My change one thing is it's a small detail, but the orderly comes in and catches Turkle making a lot of noise in the room, and then Candy comes out as if it's only her there to basically make a bad thing a lot less bad. And she's like, get that woman out of here. And then she walks off and never returns. There's not like, I'm going to see you out, honey. Right. There's not, I'll be back in 5 minutes and I better not see any funny business here. It's just like, she forgot? Was there another party happening in another wing that was worse? So I found myself saying, as a supervisor, didn't seem like you were doing a very good job of your job either.
He got paid.
That's
fair.
Right.
Best quote of the movie, Mark.
I'm a goddamn marvel of modern science.
Yes!
Of course.
Oh, I loved that.
Great one.
Yep. I that's my favorite as well. But Chad, what about you?
Juicy fruit.
Yeah.
that was what, over an hour into the movie when he finally did that?
Yeah, Chief's line is just great. It's his second line after thank you, but I just like.
I like McMurphy's sentiment too when after failing to pick up the sink and everybody was kind of laughing at him and he's like, I tried, didn't I?
I tried, yeah.
At least I tried.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked that. I've had that sentiment before, even when you've lost an argument or if you've been totally outvoted, you're like, I'm still right, and I'm okay with going down, but I'm not truly going down with my tail tucked between my legs. So I related to that as well. One other thing I wanted to call out: have you seen the movie The Dream Team?
Nope.
It has Christopher Lloyd in it. He plays a mental patient. It has an angry Michael Keaton in it, and he has an anger disorder who wears a leather jacket and can't deal with the world around him. And it reminds me a great deal of Jack Nicholson's character. And there's a character who's a very soft-spoken, timid person who reminds me a lot of Cheswick. And they steal a van and go to a baseball game. Oh. And Peter Boyle's in it, and he thinks he's Jesus. There's no one-to-one comparison on that one. Okay. But I think the movie... The Dream Team, which is hilarious, and I totally recommend it.
Is a comedy, it sounds like.
Straight up comedy.
This one isn't.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where they did it.
Yeah, straight comedy on that one. And I think that movie drew a lot from this movie. Obviously being mental care and stuff like that as well, and then making light of shooting it in a very different tone.
What year was that?
I'm going to guess late 80s.
It was later on.
Yeah.
I feel like angry Michael Keaton is redundant.
89.
89.
So I was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
Mark, is there anything that you want to plug or call out?
Not really.
Okay.
No. Go to school. Go to class.
School is cool.
School is cool.
So It's time for the show to give you a rating for this one. Mark, on a 5-star scale with half-star intervals, what would you rate One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
I'm doing 4.5.
Really?
It was
Okay.
originally 5, but the fishing scene really knocked it off for me. I just couldn't wrap my head around that whole...
It was the dancing scene of Singing in the Rain.
It really was. It really was. Like, what am I doing here? So 4.5, but
Okay.
Great movie.
Okay, and now Chad, what about you? What is your rating on a 5-star scale?
5 stars. It's powerful, it's sad, and a little too real for me at times. And I just think the performances are magnificent.
I'm with you guys, or well, I'm sorry, I'm with Chad on this one. I'm gonna go 5 stars, and it's one of those movies that I saw in college, and I was like, "Whew, that's a lot to process," and I didn't feel the need to go back to it. It's not like you bring all your friends over on a Saturday night, and like, "Hey guys, let's watch the Cuckoo's Nest.
Right.
Get some popcorn. We'll play Monopoly afterwards." It's not that kind of movie, but on the other hand, I'm really glad I returned to it, and I'm glad that I picked it up for only $3.
Nice.
So I will be watching it again by virtue of owning it, and I won't be so slow to return to it. I didn't find it quite as sad in a way this time because I knew it was coming, and I found what Chief did to be really compassionate. And if I was a vegetable, I would want somebody to smother me in the pillow for them. So it was a more beautiful, symbolic ending for me in this one, and so that helped it go down a lot better because, I mean, I did have this feeling of like, all right, we're having fun, and boy, the movie turns on you. And the first time I watched it, I had more sadness coming out of it. And this time I was able to take the whole thing in, knowing where it came from, and I saw more beauty in it. So 5 stars for me, and it rewatches exquisitely well. And
so timely. I think it's still relevant today.
In
so many
is.
different ways.
It is. Somewhere out there's a teacher, Mrs. Hannah, who is a Nurse Ratched, and that's why it's so timely. And she's still torturing high school students to this day. Chad, do you want to help me pick a movie for next time?
Sure thing.
It is that time of year to share movies with your loved one, to celebrate love in general. Let's go with a romance movie. Option number 1, Sleepless in Seattle from 1993. A recently widowed man's son calls a radio talk show in an attempt to find his father a partner. And option 2, Love Actually from 2003. Follows the lives of 8 very different couples dealing with their love lives in variously loosely interrelated tales, all set to a frantic month before Christmas in London, England. And option number 3, As Good as It Gets from 1997. A single mother and waitress, a misanthropic author, and a gay artist form an unlikely friendship after the artist is assaulted in a robbery. In case you didn't get your Jack Nicholson film.
I was going to say, we just did Jack Nicholson.
Here's Johnny.
I've never seen Sleepless in Seattle, so let's go with that one.
Okay.
Good choice.
Yep. 2 insomniacs walking around the Space Needle. That's my prediction for what this movie will be like. I haven't seen this either, so.
It's the only one I haven't seen.
All right. So new ground for next time. And Mark, thanks you so much for returning to the show. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you both. I love being here.
You pick great movies, man. Thanks.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one.
And Chad, thanks you as well.
Yeah, always a good time, and I love getting to see new movies.
Yeah. New old movies.
Yes. New to me.
If all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable, thank you so much for listening. We invite you to reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. Those ratings and reviews help others find the show. It helps us promote ourselves. It's the best thing you can do. It only takes about 30 seconds, and it's a really big help. If you want to engage with us, like us on Facebook. We post every week. We like to hear from you. Tell us why you didn't like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Tell us why we're wrong. Tell us why we're right. Follow us on Twitter at @movie_retro. Email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com, all one word. And we now have a Patreon page, so if you want to get a couple of bonus content pieces and help support the show, podcasting is not free, and we appreciate whatever contribution you want to throw our way. So we have a Patreon page out there as well, so check us out on Patreon. So, as always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other, and watch more movies. Chad?
I think we got to get to the bottom of R.P. McMurphy.